right, so we're here with Zeb Cook. It was fairly accomplished, done a lot of really cool stuff in the past.
Fair.
Yeah. For this industry, pretty accomplished, I would think. I'm Pete Bryant. This is Mike Kafis. And so Zeb, you've been around quite a bit in the industry from back in the early days.
Yeah, well, I started in 1979 at TSR. Worked there for 15 years, and then went off to work in video games for, actually longer than I did paper games.
Right.
But
Probably a little more lucrative, right?
well, yeah, that was kind of like one of the big reasons to go over.
We all like to have a little money, right?
Tell us one of your early days stories.
Oh, one of my early day stories is, basically my early days is I started as my working career as an English teacher in the middle of nowhere, and lasted all of 2 years there before really kind of thinking I needed to do something else. The Dragon magazine ran an ad that they were looking for game designers, designers, right? And which was something they'd never, ran an ad for. And I think it was like issue 20 or something like that. Probably not that low, but so, my wife said, "Go ahead, give it. Can't be better than worse than the middle of nowhere."
Right.
She didn't quite say it that way, but anyway. So I applied, and they sent this long questionnaire of all sorts of very strange questions, and answered those, and then gave them a writing sample, sent it off. Didn't think much about it at that point, but they got back to me and said, "Hey, we'd like to have you come out for an interview."
Where were you living at the time?
I was living in the Nebraska.
Okay.
Not even, in a town of 300 people.
Okay.
And teaching there.
So Lake Geneva was not going to be that far off for you.
No, Lake Geneva was going to be a step up.
Right. I'm going to a real town.
But, so, yeah, they said, "Well, we'd like to have you out for an interview." And it's like, great. And they said, "Yeah, so just get a plane ticket and come on out." And I then had to kind of painfully explain to them that I couldn't afford a plane ticket and they would have to get me one.
Right.
Because I was working on teacher pay in the 70s. Flew out there, stood on a street corner until Gary and his wife rolled up because Gary didn't drive. She drove, picked me up, went out to his house, interviewed there, spent part of the next day then, talking with other people, and then flew back. I thought it all went well. And the next thing you know, they came back and said, "Yeah, we want to hire you." So yeah, when the year ended, school year ended, because it was kind of getting close to the end of the semester, and school year ended, we packed up our things and headed for Beverly.
Right. Yeah. So was your wife like, "Oh, I didn't think he was going to get it"? Or was she?
Oh, no, she was.
Cool.
No, she was pretty happy with it. Because she liked games too.
Okay.
Awesome.
Good.
So.
And you're probably going somewhere where there's more opportunity for work and.
Yeah, because she was was not finding much in the way of work in a town of 300 people.
Right.
To it. And so we moved. We just had our kid and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, it was quite the adventure. Actually, moved and took a pay cut.
Oh, okay.
Which gives you an idea how low TSR was paying initially.
Jeez. Yeah. Well, I mean, trying to get established in a market that didn't even barely exist.
And fortunes turned around once things really exploded. But
What was the?
You're never going to get rich as a designer. Unless you owned the company, and even then you weren't going to get rich.
What was the timeline before things really started getting better from when you started?
Well, I started in 79. Things really started to explode about 1980 or so.
Yeah.
80, I think it was 80 is when the steam tunnel stuff kind of happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then 81, yeah. And that's when the curve on sales was going up.
And the infamy. Rose it even?
Well, that's the steam that we're talking about.
Yeah,
the whole thing where the talking about the kids having ceremony.
Oh yeah, it was, and the whole Satanism thing kind of got going, but and it was, there was one of those examples of, bad press is better than no press.
Yeah.
Because, as much every time they ran it about like, oh, how evil it is, I think they probably got us more,
Exposure. Yeah.
Well, not only,
exposure, a couple hundred more players. So,
not only that, but you had the pop culture at the time was really leaning into swords and sorcery and stuff. You had come out. You had all these swords and sorcery movies starting to come out. All the cartoons, you had like Thundar, and it was just the culture was going in that direction. It was very popular at that time. Lord of the Rings, I think the original Lord of the Rings cartoons came out about that time.
oh man, yeah,
Remember, like
about those
Hobbit,
things.
yeah, Rankin Bass, I think they were.
There was the Rankin Bass stuff, and then there was Bakshi stuff.
Actually, that's it. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's yeah. And so you had like the cultural thing growing up, and you guys were right there, right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
That was good.
So yeah, and TSR, to its credit, once they realized, wow, we're making money, they said, wow, we need to pay these people more.
Nice.
Which was good. We were all like, oh my god,
You're gonna get paid. I don't have to sit at someone else's desk.
it was challenging for a while, that's for sure.
Right.
But after being there for 15 years, one of the guy who hired me into TSR, Lawrence Schick, called me up because he had left years before.
Right.
Called me up and said, hey, working for this video game place in DC. Yeah.
Oh, is he going to the East Coast?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wanted to know if I'd be interested in coming to work. He was setting up the studio for these guys, and by the way, we'll pay you more.
Right.
And since I was about at the top of what TSR was going to pay, designers at that point, it was like, well, this is how you move up,
Right.
financially and stuff. And so, yep.
And it's not like you're leaving those skill sets behind. You're transforming it.
No, he was hiring me because I had those skill sets.
So you're not stopping that work. You're just changing how it gets applied.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of learning again to do, but it was again, after 15 years at TSR, I felt like I had done kind of all the things I was, going to be able to do there at least once. And so now was a new challenge.
Of course, video games were hot then. That was fun.
Oh yeah, this was
really cool.
Way back when the whole CD-ROM thing was taking off. I was like, oh my God, we can actually fit giant things on disc. And they're really bad, but we can do it.
Just put in floppy disk and then take it out. Put the second one in, take it out. Put the third one in. Oh, I went to another level. Take that disc out.
Clearly, you never played Full Throttle. That was a 4-6 disc set.
So went off to there, and then that turned into the gypsy life of the video game designer,
right?
Where you basically go to a studio and it goes bankrupt, or somebody makes you a better offer.
So how many bubbles have you seen in the video game industry through the years?
Oh, God. Oh, there was the CD-ROM bubble. That was the one I was writing on and right at first, and then went off to the kind of just standard, computer RPG kind of bubble. And it wasn't really a bubble, but it's a tough market.
Follows technology, I think. Newer technology. No, we can do all this stuff.
The big newer technology was, and then 3D gaming.
Yeah.
Gaming. Oh my God.
They have math coprocessor in them now.
And we have to have fancy. We have to have a fancy engine for it all. And then. Diablo took off, and now every big game had to be like Diablo.
Yeah,
all this sort of stuff. Then Origin, Ultima, with their online, and then suddenly, then I wound up basically ultimately in the MMO field.
Okay.
And worked on several titles, City of Villains, and then several things that never saw the light of day. And finally wound up on Elder Scrolls Online and worked on that for about 10 years.
So you worked on it. What exactly was your job, or your role in?
Well, for a while, I was an interim creative director for a while. And
What does that mean? Like for anyone who doesn't know what that is.
well, the creative director was supposedly the guy who was making all the decisions, but that's not exactly true. Yeah, in our case, because well, we were a studio. Our studio was basically was part of the ZeniMax family, which owns Elder Scrolls, but we were not the Bethesda studio that had created Elder Scrolls, and so
A Maryland company.
Yes.
yeah. So so there was a lot of like, checking with them about these are the things you want to do and that sort of stuff. And then our studio head and other people are all very involved in the, design decisions and stuff like that. And the thing you really discover when you're working with video games is that unlike paper games, you are not the person in charge of as nearly as much as you were in paper, because in paper I would make, this is how the game will work. This is the story. Oh, by the way, here's the art I would like. We need to fill the pages, that sort of stuff.
Like a lot more crossing over of roles.
Yeah, and so with a video game as a designer, you discover that I can only tell people this is what we need, right? But I have to then rely on the programmer to do stuff. I have to have artists to do stuff, and all of them have their own like ideas that they want to get in and they want to do, and sometimes they have like, there's a lot of technical knowledge and stuff about, you can't do that, or no, there's a better way to do that. Or in cases, especially like with engineers, it's like, don't tell me how to do that because you're going to be wrong.
Right.
You've never experienced that, huh?
Like, I'm an engineer.
Yeah. And then I think my favorite example with engineering is stuff with video games is stuff that was real simple in paper is not simple necessarily in a video game. My favorite example is always rope. And so it's like, we give them a rope. Okay, you give them a rope. Well, in a paper game, you say you got rope and there are 18 billion things you can do with it.
Right.
And you just say, oh yeah, you tie the guy up, no problem. In a video game, you say, you tie the guy up. And it's a whole nest of technical problems.
Well, what do we do with the schematics of that? And then,
Yeah, it's like, well, that means we're going to have to have him fixed in one pose like this all the time. How do we get him into that pose so we can do the tie up thing? What if what if you just leave him, what if you, and then, well, if they can tie him on the up to that, can they tie him other things up? And it becomes a very,
sorry, or imagine a lot of times it's like, let's just not put that in.
Yeah.
It's not.
Well, so the answer is, a lot of times is, we don't do that.
That'll be a cutscene. And
cutscenes are a problem too.
But and then you got to figure out what are the resources that you have, like what kind of computers are people going to have, and you got to develop for that. And then you got that is it the 3-year window where if you start a game, you got to have it done in 3 years, or else the technology passes what you were designing?
Well, what you do is you when you start the game, you look where you think the technology will be. And this was really bad for a while, and it's slowed down, and it's become much less of an issue because technology has now kind of gotten to a point where, it's
hitting a ceiling.
You're hitting a little bit more consistent. But it used to be like every 6 months the video cards would turn over, and now
so you're like aiming for a moving target in time.
So what you would do is you would kind of figure out where do we think it will be in the 2 years from now or whatever, right? And then you would start designing for that, and you would start working and you would hope you're right, because in the 4 years later when you came out, then that particular platform set or whatever would have penetrated the market, so you'd have enough now to be able to because you didn't want to always be and now you need this absolutely super card to play our game,
right?
Because that meant you were selling to 5 people,
right?
And whereas if you had this card that came out 3 years ago, but is still good, still works to play our game, then that's your minimum requirement set. Then, you had a much bigger base that you could sell to.
And yet, that is a software development lifecycle.
Right. Think about it like this, right? You're not just trying to hit a moving target. You're trying to hit a moving target that's on a moving target, because it's all those factors, right? Where's the technology going to be? Are people going to have that technology? Is anyone that we're competing with shooting for a better, line than we are?
Are they going to come up with some software solution that we haven't,
right?
We've never seen?
Correct.
And all of that on top of And is our game any fun?
Right. Yeah, it has to be fun. On top of it, well, that's like the number one thing. It's got to be fun.
Yeah.
Because if it's not fun, it doesn't matter how technical it was or whatever. Yeah, and then I guess you got to know your audience, right? Because you can't.
Well, theoretically,
Please everybody.
yeah.
And every time you try, you make.
Trying to please everybody on any kind of game is a bad idea. You know, you have to figure out who are you going for. The trick is try and figure out what is the kind of broadest possible you can work with.
Right.
In that, you know. So,
Like, is there any little thing you could take out of here that would shut a good chunk of people out and wouldn't be too much of a burden, and I could still keep the cool stuff for the target that I'm working?
yeah, it's like, yeah, you know, is this going to be very Twitch oriented? Is this going to be, you know, more of a Baldur's Gate 3 kind of like, you know, top down, more deliberate paced kind of a thing? You know, all these sorts of things. These are the things that, like, those choices alone determine a huge amount of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think Cyberpunk, the 2044, 2077, sorry, 2077. Yes, 2077. I haven't played it yet. I've been wanting to, but I haven't touched. You're killing my soul. I know, right? That was a really interesting case study in like trying to get something out on the market on time, but it not really being finished, but finished enough and kind of.
Well, I've done that too.
Because that would right because you played it right in the early days, and I'm an apologist. How ashamed to say it? Okay, but there were people saying it's unplayable because of these glitches, and then I hear other people say no, it's not a big deal, but it's a glitch, and because you know some people are more critical than others. What did you think of like that changeover, like when they released that first like real patch that fixed most things?
I mean, it was almost a whole different game. I mean, have you played it?
No, I haven't played that one. I mean, I've had that exact experience with games that we released where they were like, yeah, this is like, you know, Elder Scrolls when it came out for PC. Yeah, it was a rocky start, and our subscription model was completely different. We had the fortunate luck that we were committed to also doing it on platforms, but they were coming out a year later. And so we basically spent that year to make some, you know, significant changes to kind of the gameplay, some of the gameplay issues, worked out a lot of the bug issues, this sort of stuff, and essentially got a relaunch out of it. And then even after that, we kept updating, we kept doing big stuff so that it was, you know, and it's kind of like Bethesda takes a long view about games.
Correct.
So they said, you know, they kept the team together on this, and yeah, now it's like very successful, and yeah.
And that's the problem. That was the problem with CD Projekt Red being kind of handcuffed into they were forced into producing that game to be able to run on the PS4. They wanted it to run on the PS5. Everything they were building in that world engine would run way better on the PS5. And they were told by Sony, nope, this game has to run on the PS4 as well. And as soon as they were like, that was taken off the table, and when they were able to do the 2.0 patch, it was a new game. It was a different game. They were able to put all the stuff that they had to take out because of the PS4. They were able to put it back in. And, you know, I mean, there's a lot of dynamics in that game that are like so much different. So again, hitting the wrong target at the wrong time.
So Elder Scrolls, I know that was one of the first multiplayer games, the MMOs. Was it the first?
No, it was hardly. There were tons of it.
And I'm not talking about like mods and stuff. I know those are multiplayer. I'm talking about the kind of game that Elder Scrolls is.
Well, the thing is, Elder Scrolls as the MMO, we didn't call it an MMO. We acknowledged that it was all, you know, it's massively multiplayer and all this sort of stuff. But most of, you know, up to that point, massively multiplayer games where you ran around with a whole bunch of people in the world, and things were often very oriented towards you couldn't accomplish stuff unless you actually teamed up, this sort of stuff.
Right.
You know, you'd get through a storyline, and then you'd run into the final fight, and it would be like, oh no, you need some friends to deal with that.
Right.
And we made a very conscious decision that we were going to treat this as a single player game, that our main storyline is essentially a single player game.
Okay.
It can be accomplished by you by yourself if you want. You can have friends, but they're you know, and you can invite friends into it and all that sort of. But that just makes your things easier, right?
Okay. All right.
And that we were also, you know, we looked a lot at, like, well, what makes what makes Elder Scrolls work, and a lot of it was the stories that you did, and the fact that there wasn't a single story, and then you just kind of went from front to back. There was like, oh, you went, what's over that hill, and you found stuff, and so we tried to create basically within the MMO world, which is that kind of sense of I can just go explore and find something to do. And then the real challenge was, because the original Elder Scrolls series that people really like is a single player game. You could do things and the world would change, right? It would change often very dramatically, but it was a single player game. So,
So it's fun.
yeah, it's easy to do. Problem with the multiplayer game is you can't do that really, because there's like 18 other people waiting to, to play the same thing. And, if you change the world, you can't change the world for them.
Okay.
So we had to come up with a bunch of, solutions to how do we make it feel like you have changed things, but the game is, basically, other players can come through and then still have that experience, and they could actually have changes occur in another way. And so there's a lot of visual changes, so a lot of things like that. And there's a lot of things you can do with dialogue and all that sort of stuff to where people reflect and say like, oh, yeah, you gave the widget to this other guy. How could you do that? That sort of thing. So it's a bit of a compromise. It was a bit of a compromise, but it worked very well. And like I said, we chose to focus on a lot of storytelling and characters and that sort of stuff. So wound up having to have a team of writers.
Right.
So I wound up, after interim content lead, interim creative director, wound up basically as one of the content leads. Basically, and there, your content lead is you're leading a team of probably 5 to 6 designers, and then a writer, and working with the map people and all this sort of stuff to basically build out a chunk of the world and come up with all those stories and make sure that they get implemented. And are they fun?
And are they doable with the technology?
Yeah, are they doable with the technology, or can we find some way to get a little more variety in here? Because we really didn't want to have any kind of like fetch quests where still get me 20 rat skins.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And so we would work on trying to come up with, well, why, it's not go get me 20 rat skins. It's I have this problem I need you to help me with.
Right.
It involves getting 20 rat skins.
Right.
But
it wasn't just get me 20.
Yeah. Well,
not going shopping.
Yeah.
You have a quest.
But it was I'm actually doing something for somebody in the world, right, and that sort of stuff. And it does get a little bit, it is hard to get in an MMO to get players to feel like they have ultimate choice, because all your requests are, I have a problem, can you help me, kind of a thing. But if with a lot of good writing and a lot of work, you can frame things up so that's like, oh yeah, I really want to get involved in this.
Right. So let's get back to your role playing, like table or RPG games. What's your passion? You're obviously here at Total Con, so you're playing games. Are you running games too?
I am running games. Okay. I always try to run. Basically, they invite me to come out and talk to people and this. But part of it is also that people want to play a game that that I've either done or I'm running or something like that. So I run games. I don't run a lot because it's exhausting and I'm getting old.
Yes.
But yeah, every day I've got a session I have to do this afternoon at which will have a group of players and run them through a fairly simple. And for conventions, you can't do anything hugely elaborate, because you're getting a lot of people that have never played together as a group, and just want to make sure they have fun.
Okay.
So yeah. So
and do you run stuff that you've written in the past, or do you bring new stuff?
I almost always bring new stuff. Although I'm kind of developing a set of convention games that are like, okay, I can take this game that I designed for a previous convention elsewhere and run it, and so that makes my life a little easier preparing. But I don't, I don't find it going back and doing something I've written before. It usually doesn't work well for a convention because they're just too long. It's kind of like, hey, how do I make that work?
And they've probably played it.
Yeah, then people may have played it, although some of them are now so ancient, I could probably get away with that. But what I'm doing, one of the sessions I'm doing for this convention is Return to the Isle of Dread.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And, which I first did a couple of years ago at another convention, and it went well. And I said, okay, I'm gonna repeat it, but it has an immense number of players. And from some fit of madness on my part, I think I've run it with as many as 16 players at once, and it's an exercise in controlled chaos.
Yes, yes, it is. Or futility. Yeah, same difference. Yeah, I ran a 15-person table last year. By the time I was done, I was just like, never again, never.
It takes a lot of energy.
So much, because your brain is like click, 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 clicking.
Yeah, it's theater at that point, and like, okay, if I get these guys through 3 encounters in the entire course of a 4-hour session,
right,
we're doing good.
Right, yeah. So I have a question that I like to ask people who are game designers, or any kind of designer, really. You've made a bunch of products over the years, right? Because that's just what you do. You're constantly making new stuff. Have you ever made, or what would be something that you really liked and you believed in and was cool and you still stand by it, but was not received well?
Oh, wow. I've made a whole bunch of, I like some odd stuff, and some things get received well, but not as well as I would like, or we would like. I like historical stuff.
Right.
So like the Vikings source book, that whole historical AD&D kind of line we did, I think those were really cool, and it was fun doing the research and putting those together. But that was kind of new. That was never going to appeal to more than just a
You're hardcore, right?
Yeah, it was kind of a niche thing. There's various modules of one sort or another that just didn't quite, it's like it's hard to estimate actually how well a module, because the is received, because they all tended to have generally about the same numbers over any given period. They didn't know if how much did it really get played, how much did you have to rely on 10 years later people saying like, oh yeah, I played that, that was a really good adventure.
Oh, okay. You know what, I have retroactively good ideas? Yes. RPG Nielsen ratings. Okay. Right. That would fix it. So,
oh my God, that would destroy us all.
Yeah, nobody would design anything. It would go, it's not worth it. You thought people played it. Yes.
Planescape. A lot of people love Planescape, but I don't think it gets played a lot. At least because frankly, when we designed it, I was kind of convinced I had gone, kind of so crazy that it was kind of unplayable.
Friday. Yeah, because Planescape, that was like a left turn, right? That was...
Yeah, it was meant to be very much of a left turn, too.
Right.
But it was, but yeah.
I'm going to admit, I never heard of it until I read it. I could kind of glean into it, but tell us more about it.
Well, so Planescape was that was right towards the end of my time at TSR. And at that point, AD&D and TSR in the kind of like inner circles of the industry was kind of viewed as kind of like, oh yeah, we are the solid pillar, but we're kind of stodgy. We play things safe, all that sort of stuff. Well, we definitely, definitely had the making sure that we had a general kind of comics kind of code that we worked within, that sort of thing. And so this whole idea came up for doing, some kind of setting that was, in the play, or actually originally it was to do a whole bunch of books, each about one for each of the planes, and we realized that, that A, that's insane.
Right.
And B, how much can you say about the plane of lawful good?
Right. Right.
So instead, let's do a campaign setting. And then Jim Ward, who was my boss at that point, was like, you're going to do this setting thing. But he had some things he wanted, like, we want to kind of kind of go for the vampire kind of crowd, the whole, we wanted to be a little bit more, like modern, I guess, or whatever, it's more current.
Yeah.
But also that, it had to be a campaign setting in and of itself. We had done a lot of other good products like Spelljammer and stuff, but one of the things we discovered is that a lot of those were not creating, they were not Spelljammer campaigns. And said you got Spelljammer, and then you decided to go on, muck around a little bit, and then you went back to your regular campaign kind of a thing. And so we wanted this one to have a little bit more of its own its home and have its own center.
Right.
So this led to creating Planescape, which where I just went kind of completely mad. Because it's, first off, nothing about the planes makes sense to look at it as in a whole. It's like, oh, look, you have the Modrons over here, you have demons over here, you've got all this sort of stuff. How do you make it all work together? And how do you make it work together so that like a fourth level character doesn't just like die the second they try to do anything, right?
And I mean, you're essentially writing alien worlds. Yeah. I mean, it's like the whole place is completely different. It could have different laws.
And none of them are kind of like standard fantasy places.
Right.
So created the city where everybody could go to, accommodated, everything from the ultra powerful to the lowly characters, that sort of thing. And then said, well, this place is weird. So the cities, and I loved paradox kind of things and surrealist fiction, and these, reading a bunch of things like that, and history. So we wound up, the sigil sits at the top of an infinite spire. You'd figure that out.
Right. Can't do the math.
But it had offered doorways to anywhere that you wanted to go. So it was the hub, and then you had basically it also as like the teleporter essentially that could get you, if provided you knew how to open that doorway, could get you to whatever location you wanted. So it was the excuse to go have adventures on all the other planes, and then have someplace safe to get back to.
Everyone had a fringe path. Yeah, I know, right? And then you also have to figure out, well, what are they they have to have things that they can do.
Yeah.
And I'm certain there's certain planes you can't even go on unless you had some kind of magic protection or something.
Yeah, I mean,
you wouldn't go to the plane of fire.
I'd go to a plane of fire. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah. That's where you roast marshmallows, right?
But so the city became a lot of the adventuring actually would take place in the city itself, especially at low levels. But also it was the excuse for people from all these other locations to come and say, hey, I have a problem, we have an opportunity, whatever. And I'm looking for some folks who can help do it. And then, set you up for the whole, whatever it is you had to go do off elsewhere. And then, got a concept artist, Dana Knutson, had time available. And so they had discovered at this point after Dark Sun that, having like a really dedicated art look to something really was, don't know if it helped sales, but it was cool.
Yeah. Good looking books.
Yeah. I mean,
I think it's yes and yes.
Yeah. And so he spent like a month doing up a lot of sketches and designs and this sort of stuff, kind of worked out like what the architecture style would look like, and all the little faction symbols for the different groups that you could join. And then came up with this for one of the faction symbols was this round thing with spikes all out of it, which we looked at and said that's really cool. It doesn't match any of the factions we have, but we need to use it. So that became the Lady of Pain.
Is that on the cover of the book?
Yeah, and that's the piece on the cover.
Yeah.
And so once we had her in an image, it was like, okay, we need. I then said, well, okay, we'll make her kind of central to the city, that she's kind of like the symbol of the city in many ways.
Oh, neat. Okay.
And also it's like, this terrifying, godlike thing that there are no stats for her. There's no, basically, she just, if you need, she's the GM's excuse to, it's like, oh, yeah, I need to make sure that this happens or doesn't happen kind of stuff. She can do that.
Right.
And then there were all the factions that you could join that, for there it was coming up with the idea of philosophers with clubs. It's like, well, so there are all these, you imagine a bunch of drunk college philosophy grads or whatever, all arguing about different types of philosophy, and then basically translate those into different groups that you could join.
Right. Right. Yep. All right. Awesome. So what are you like? So what are you doing now? I know you said you're retired.
Yes.
So, but what are your goals over the next couple of years? That
My goals are
travel around, have fun.
do as little as possible, to not get too bored.
Right. That's the dream. Yeah. Like, do you still play? Like, I know you.
I play actually tabletop miniatures.
Okay.
I play historical and/or fantasy miniature stuff, and have a war game group that I can go and play with every now and then, and so yeah, and then you paint the little figures and all that sort of stuff.
How does it work? As we get older in our eyes.
Yeah, well, let's just say, my eyes, I got giant magnifiers. I figured out ways to brace my arms because my hands will start to shake. All this great stuff.
I have a miniature painting set of glasses, which I can't walk around the house with, but I can see from ear to ear. Great.
Yeah, I've thought about doing that, but then I would know me, and I would be dumb enough that I would try to walk around the house with them.
It'll be like robot, like having a controller and painting it for you.
Well, they have this really cool, like they'll have like a magnifying glass that's got these little clips so you can hold the magnifying light on it. Yep. And so those are pretty cool. I'm thinking about getting one of those, but I don't know.
Yeah. And so I do that. I write. I still write adventure stuff for a lot of times for conventions, or just short articles for people who I know that have doing some kind of compilation thing and want something, and I'll do that.
I had a 2-part question.
Mm-hmm.
One is the video game, and one is the RPG. From both of those, what is your favorite project you've worked on from either one?
Well, favorite project to work on for video game probably has been Elder Scrolls Online, because it and has as much to do with the quality of the game as to do with the quality of the company.
Right.
So it made being there a long time survivable.
Right.
Bearable. Well, mind you, I mean, I think every other video game company I worked for, was usually like a 3-year stint and then a move cross country. Mm. So suddenly being able to stay in one place for a long time was nice.
That's very common.
Yeah. But for the paper game stuff, probably certainly it's the second edition is certainly for the amount of impact it had. And it was like, that was the first time really we're going to do the whole edition war thing.
Right.
We didn't realize it was going to be edition war.
All right, Zeb. Well, thanks for joining us for the interview. It was awesome talking to you. And are you going to be at any conventions coming up?
I am coming up. I'm going to be at Founders and Legends and Gary Con. That's probably the next. Going to be in Baltimore for a little one-day thing because I used to live in Baltimore, so that's it. It's where we're from. All right.
Yeah, well, Baltimore. Baltimore.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, go to Game Face.
Okay, music. Okay. Okay.
It's at a brewery. Can't be bad.
Oh, when is it? Do you know?
It's the 9th, 10th of March.
Okay.
Yeah. And then after that, I'm just going to go in for fun to London to go to Salute. It's a big miniatures one-day thing.
Nice. Okay.
And then Modena, Italy for play.
Oh, you poor thing.
Yeah, I know.
Terrible.
Yeah. And then I'll also in North Texas.
Oh, that's a
RPG Con. This is the year it seemed I'm going to all these cons. It has, because now it's the 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
And then also I'll be at Gen Con, which I haven't been to in like 20 years or something like that.
That's overwhelming.
Yeah, people keep saying that, so I guess I'm going to go be overwhelmed.
Yeah. Enjoy it.
Well, I knew I liked you because you're from Baltimore.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you around.
All right.